Hello and welcome to the Digital Health Hackers podcast, where we go over innovators in digital health. And today we have Pawan Jindal, the CEO and co-founder of Darena Solutions. So, Pawan, you are a doctor by training, and you've been through medical school. And just let's start with your story. How did you get here?
Hey, Sidharth, thank you so much for having me. It's a very interesting story, kind of, how it came along. As you said, is like, I did my MBBS from my medical degree from Delhi, India, and then did a master's in health informatics in US. And what had happened was after I did my MBBS, at that time the computers was not that much kind of, common in India, but they were starting some of these exams that were taken on computer. And I actually got access to a computer to practice for an exam, and that was kind of my first experience of how to use a computer. And I don't know, for some reason, it was like I was less kind of interested in the exam and how it works, and more in how the computer works. As sometimes, luck would have it, is like the exam got actually postponed, and there were some issues in there, and you can say it's like I was too distracted by the computer. And didn't do really well in my postgraduate exams, and some of the opportunities just came together, and was like, maybe I have a better future in this. So there was this health informatics programs and things starting there. There was not much in India at that time, so I got accepted into a really good program here in US. Came here and did that 2 year course, and it kind of just flew from there. Original plan honestly was to give back MLE, go back to there, but it just went in a track where I felt this was really my true calling and passion, and just kind of grew from there.
Excellent. So, I think Darena Solutions is known for a few things, and today you have established yourselves as one of the major players in the US market, especially in the US
Mhm.
healthcare market. So, what are the main things that Darena does for the audience who don't know anything about Darena, and how did you get here?
Yeah, so just to give a little background, Darena Solutions, based in St. Louis, Missouri, and we have been in business for 15 years, and it's really very interesting. Every company has a healthcare story behind it, and we have one too. So after I did my health informatics, I did a consulting with some of the leading healthcare organizations. I was really fortunate, the companies that I worked with, to get an exposure. But then 2008, we had our son that was born, and my wife had a very difficult pregnancy. A year before that, you all know about morning sicknesses, and what we call as hyperemesis. And Siddharth, you will relate with this. Is like, when we are in med school, you have many times where they'll be like, hey, there is a patient in there that is very unique, and we'll all go and look at that patient and observe it. And it was such an extreme case of hyperemesis that when many times we were in the hospital, we'll actually have those students come in there. Hey, is it okay if we observe you? And that kind of gave me like a little different perspective of really seeing it from a patient's perspective. We touch it from the research side, we touch it from the patient side, but that was like looking at it from a whole different side. Hey, I am that number, I am that unique, there. But what was also kind of really weird, or that situation happened for me, was like we were once in one of the ERs, and I saw the nurse using the system that 2 years back I had actually implemented in that hospital. And I saw her struggling, and I saw her using that system. So there was like all these moments coming together, and it will be like most of the time, my wife will be okay, but then every 3 or 4 days, her electrolytes will go out of balance, and we'll be traveling or we'll be doing it, and we'll show up in an ER, and I will be telling the doctor, is like, hey, I know what it is. I mean, they say, right, doctors make the worst patients, they make the worst caretakers too, and I'm trying to tell them, is like, this is what it is, or hey, take a copy of this, my records I carry with them. But it was like a pain, kind of trying to get in there. So after our son was born, he was a little bit out. My wife and we kind of took this, is like, okay, we're going to try to solve this problem. And I'll be honest here, I think we underestimated the problem. This is pre-iPhone era. Patient engagement was not there. So really the mission behind Darena Solutions, where it started is like, we wanted to build a patient enablement, patient, solution. But what happened around that 2009 period was that meaningful use happened in US. There was a lot of changes happening. So we kind of pivoted from a patient focus to more of a, like basically an interoperable and EHR solution. Over a period of 15 years, we have actually launched an EHR. We have launched multiple solutions that we have sold. But what we have been focused on in the last 7 years, and I say it is like, it all comes back is like as FHIR was coming back, as all the innovation that has happened in the consumer healthcare space, we saw this opportunity to go back to what we were, before. And we have really, capitalized on the whole FHIR market and build a platform that is basically designed to now create more and more innovative apps in healthcare. One thing that we are really proud of is like when the Cures Act came into US, we were the first company to be certified for it, 2 years ahead of the second one, which is one of the big EHRs. But also like what has that given us is today we basically have the largest number of live FHIR APIs in US, right? So it's a lot of data, it's a lot of experience that we have gained working with like hundreds of EHRs of like what are the challenges, and we have really tried to now bring that up together and go back to kind of our roots and try to solve like problems in a different ways, like how can we truly create innovation in healthcare, and bring it together. And that's kind of where we have been like focused on recently over the last few months in our new platform called MeldRx.
It's really interesting because especially we went through a lot. So, the hospital in which your wife was admitted in already had an EHR that you had built. That's not something a lot of people can say, right? And then the statement of, Darena Solutions having the most number of FHIR APIs in the US, right? Like, so how did this come to be, and what really is the reason behind this, and how did you go into the market, and what is the product that does this?
Yeah, sure. So we have multiple products under Darena Solutions, and kind of we have a big focus on the regulatory solutions too. So there's a set of solutions that kind of flow under the regulatory, but we also have like some of our app solutions. So specifically on the FHIR APIs, how it came is like over our 15-year history, right? When we started in 2009, we kind of have worked with multiple EHRs where they come to us, we consult with them, we provide them a lot of solution. And then this whole FHIR thing and the Cures Act came together. In my opinion, it was probably one of the biggest changes in the US healthcare regulation, because now it was like not that, okay, you can just do some things and check the box. It was really opening up, your system to outside. And there was a lot of concerns of what do you mean any app developer can come and, hit my server? I mean, a lot of questions and concerns where it was like, the naysayers were there too many. So we sat down back in 2019 when this regulation was early coming on, and had a very good feedback from many of the partners that we are working with EHRs at medium to small sized EHRs, and said, how are you planning to solve this? And it was like, this is too much of a lift. So we went back and we kind of readjusted our roadmap to say, how can we build a solution that can just be used as a plug and play solution for these EHRs to meet their G10 requirement, the G10 D10 requirement. And I think it really helped because we had that feedback from the customers. We knew kind of, hey, what will be the toughest challenge? How will we integrate with the EHR? How will we make sure we can leverage their existing CCDAs? What is the minimal lift? As we can grow with what the market is, because no one knew back then that time, like, okay, what exactly will this requirement mean? All it was is like, okay, it's basically going to be an API requirement. So I would really like to give a shout here, for like, our EHR partners that really worked with us and have stayed with us, is like, to help us build this. And then really kind of took it that this is not just for meeting the requirement. Many of them are like leading healthcare organizations, or they basically EHRs that have many providers that are leading out there where they really believe it. Like, we have the the largest urology, the largest dermatology, the largest, many of the specialty EHRs that are our system. So it's really been a very collaborative effort working with these partners and bringing these systems out.
Excellent. So, I don't know, you've been deep in the trenches. You know how EHRs are and integrating with them and so on. So, what was your vision? Like, what did you want to do, and where did you think that okay, it's not really where you really want it to be?
So that's a very exciting question, Sidharth, because as I said, is like my passion and the vision always goes back to is like why did we start Darena, and sometimes you have to just pivot because of kind of where the market goes and adjust it. But if I can go back, and I think I'm living the dream, or our team is living the dream, is in it is so what we feel is like that healthcare is going through what I like to call it like an iPhone moment right now, right? Is like they're the EHRs are not going to be ultimately the end product of what is used to provide care, right? The EHRs need to turn into a platform, and the innovation and everything will really come from the apps that sit on it. And again, I'm not the first person saying this. We have heard this. We have heard a concept a lot being played around these days is headless EHR, right? Can there be an EHR that where you just have a database and you build something on the apps on it? So I think that time will come, but in order for that to come, you need a very mature app market. There needs to be this ability of enough apps in there, enough trust in there, where the EHR users can actually start trusting the apps more than they trust the EHR. So that is where we think is like if that can happen. Now for that to happen, if we go back and say what made that happen in iPhone is like if anyone can simply build an app, right? And what I mean by that is the best apps will not come from an EHR, will not come from a healthcare organization. It will come from a patient, or it will come from someone that really has lived the problem. So what we are really thinking is with the EHRs and everyone that we have, can we build a platform where we can really lower the bar, or like kind of level it up, where anyone with a motivation, right? Any person out there who's going through a very rare disease, or anyone basically that has been through an experience, can enter the healthcare market with minimal expertise, or with expertise of another industry, with knowing the basic APIs and so, but they're not struggling, oh my god, it's going to take me 6 months to get connected to an EHR, right? You have your idea, you basically know how to solve it. What can we really do to lower that bar to come in there? Because once that is there and everyone from other industries is coming into EHR, I mean, this whole iPhone moment will happen, because then it will not be okay, what can my EHR do, right? It is like, what can the data provider do? So if I can just kind of summarize it, what we are trying to do is we try to go back and say, what are the challenges? If I want to build an app today, what are the challenges that I will come across, right? Is like, one is obviously, how do I get the data? And we have tried to address it, okay, EHR data, but then more than EHR data, then patient data, network data, regulatory. I want the security, I want an app platform, right? So basically we are trying to meld all of those together, and we think is like, we see ourselves as the enablers of this, where truly we can enable a healthcare ecosystem where apps are driving the care, and EHRs are basically acting as the platform, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. This concept of having the platform and separating the apps completely, and then just we are seeing this already, right? Like, we know that Epic or Cerner, or even the biggest EHR in the market, given infinite funding, cannot satisfy the needs of
Exactly.
every stakeholder, right? So it's just like logical to say that the EHR is dead. Long live the headless EHR, right? Like the data
Exactly.
platform EHR. So
Yeah.
it's now just like, how do we get there? What do we do to get there? There are so many people fighting this battle, and it's refreshing to see you, especially in the US market, trying to do this, because all the other people that I've seen do this, they're starting on markets where it's fresh,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the European countries are moving to platform-based approach. The government is giving them a good push to move to these
Yep.
approaches. But in
And
the
we talked
US,
about that a
it's
lot. Yeah.
yeah. So in the
Yeah.
US, it's almost like you have these major EHRs, right? And then the government is kind of pushing them to open up certain APIs through regulation like G10 and like, the 21st Century Cures Act. It's trying to do it. But what has your experience been on? Is this enough? Do we have enough of an API to build apps today?
Yeah. So that's one of the things, right? It varies a lot, right? And when I say varies, is like by the EHRs, right? Some of the big EHRs are enabling it, but I mean, there are today what, like, I think it's 180 plus the last I checked number of EHRs that are supposed to be supporting a G10. Okay. But and that's like only FHIR US CDI data. And trust me, like even the US CDI data can get a long way, right? Okay. I mean, we hear a lot of app developers wanting a little more than data and other things. So I don't think it is where the intent of Cures Act was. It's one of those things when someone is only doing it for regulation, they try to do what is minimal to check the box. And I think most of them, unfortunately, are still checking the box. But it is getting better. But I think it will get better as the revenue model also changes for some of these EHRs. So, and that's kind of one of the things we are trying to do is like, if an app developer can build an app that works with Epic, but it is so cool that it works with even the smallest EHR, and you can go to the smallest EHR and say, hey, for you to make this app available to your providers, you can actually charge them for it. There's value to this, right? So ultimately, there has to be like a financial model that kind of goes behind it. So we don't think it is there, but that's something, we think we can change or we can enable it. But we are definitely seeing a lot of interest from app developers that are coming to us and says like, hey, I can get my app working with Epic, but I have this couple of issues. But what does it take to take from Epic, from Cerner to Athena, but then to this, mini EHR that is there? Because I have 100 clients, this is a specialist EHR, it kind of works from there. So, and I think, Sidharth, one of the things that is really pushing this is like the whole buzz around AI. There is a lot of interest and concerns and good and good concerns about how will AI impact healthcare. There is a recent regulation that came out, B11, that is kind of driving it. So I think over the next 6 months, if I can make this bold prediction, you will suddenly see a big jump in the AI apps, because now we have a baseline of how these apps should work, and we are already seeing a lot of app developers coming to us to say we want that. So I think this year will be pretty remarkable in seeing the this, and AI will drive a lot of that requirement or demand.
Yeah, definitely. The future is, exciting. So today, when you think about a developer who has built an app that works with, let's say, Epic, what does their journey look like when they have to, and again, it's easy for them to start off with the sandbox and, like do that first hello world kind of an application. So in your experience, what happens after that? How does the journey of the typical developer today look like who wants to actually build this killer app?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that kind of really helped us. I kind of mentioned it, like last October we launched a platform called MeldRx, and that was kind of based on some of the concerns we heard around that. And just to give a little background there, kind of how we came across it and specifically addressing these concerns is like, we launched G10, right? We had all these EHRs that kind of took our application, they built it in there, and they're paying us, the fees and everything for us. And then they came to us, it's like, hey, I mean, we are paying you all this thing, but like no one's really trying to build an app with us, right? I mean, they're all going for the Epic. I mean, like, so we kind of had a way to come up with this platform to justify and give enough incentives for app developers to say, if you're building an app for Epic, you can make that app work here too, and kind of help our customers also extend it. And that actually made us think beyond, like, okay, it's not just about us supporting a platform, it is about supporting a platform that can make an app on Epic versus Cerner. And really it opened the boxes, like, okay, what do we need to do to actually take a developer to go through all the process of building an app with Epic or Cerner? So I'll say it is like it's basically like, if I can say, it's like 2 or 3 major challenges that we see when they're working with the top EHRs, right? So like one of the common ones is, okay, as you said, is like there is a sandbox available. I can make my first call one way or the other, I can get it, right? First of the time they will run into is like, okay, this is a particular data element. I need to write the data back. Okay, my app needs that data. So the number one concern, is like, okay, I can't do much in there. This EHR is supporting, okay, Epic might support these 20 resources, but Cerner might not even report like some of them differently, or the other EHR might not. So the first thing always is like, okay, even at the sandbox level or this, how can I get the right data capabilities? The second we often hear is like, I am building an app that is for a very specific scenario. The sandbox only allows this cup, like basically pre-loaded data. How can I get more data that I can test and everything with? Okay, but then I think it is like, okay, like, and again, there are ways we have addressed that challenges, but then you go to the next level is, how do I actually take it live, right? Getting my first client and then getting my, like the 100th client or the second client. So those are like where we divide them into separate challenges. Is like, we can say, like, we can basically help on getting your app out, getting it basically compatible, get it out there. But I want to be honest again, is like, that we are in healthcare. Every organization, even if they're using the same EHR, is always different. And we always say, like, your first two apps will be bumpy. There will be, but that's kind of where we navigate around, and we try to provide as many resources as we can to basically simplify that path.
Understood. So here it seems like, again, with MeldRx, you seem to be building apps need a good standard API to build on top of. It seems like the different proprietary EHRs are just like checking the boxes and not really providing things that
Exactly.
real apps can run on. So this compatibility layer is now being like MeldRx, something that can transition from Epic to at least half of the other FHIR APIs available, which happens to be Darena's.
Yeah, correct, Sidharth. And if I can just add one thing to it, what we wanted to make sure is like, we are not building a proprietary APIs or other things. So our goal is to do as much as possible in the FHIR standard. So that way, because it is a standard, right? So the APIs are based on that way. We do the normalization and everything behind the scenes. But our goal is that you are building an app today, you follow the FHIR standard because it's a national standard, and it's not just for the APIs like CDS hooks or Firecast or like EHR launch. We are trying to make that simple so you can start working on it with the hope and the expectation that ultimately everyone will come at par with that. All the EHRs will come at that, right? So how can we fill that barrier in between? For them to basically work against one interface, but then also solve some of the issues of we can't write to that today, right? Okay, a task API is a very common one. We hear is like many of the AI applications and other things are all about care management, creating tasks, creating other things, and not many EHRs actually support writing that. And so that's one of the things we hear a lot, and we have built some demos around it, how you can enable it today. But tomorrow, if Epic allows it, with just a click of a button, you will just start writing it back to Epic. But in the meantime, let your app grow. So how can we fill the gap? But at the same time, we don't want to create another proprietary layer. So our goal always is to keep it as close to FHIR as we can, but at the same time, kind of growing it from there where they can have access to one API.
Excellent. I heard demo. Should we have a live demo and show the audience, like what this looks like?
Absolutely, would love to. So let me go ahead and share my screen.
Yep, you're live.
Okay, let me know if you can see my screen. Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, so just to build a little base in here, let me just get this window closed. Okay, so as I said, right? Okay, so we have an application called Blue Button Pro that is used by our EHRs. That is kind of the FHIR servers and everything. And then we have a platform called MeldRx, and this is a platform which is basically used by app developers to build apps and test it, and kind of just to say what is the main problem we are trying to solve, right? And we say it is like it's like the problems in multiple layers. Like first is, I am a new app developer, I just want to start developing an app, right? So we give you an easy way to go and create like a really powerful sandbox that you can use it in the way you want, right? So first of all, go test it, build it, everything, and test that sandbox. But then take the step from there. Okay, now I'm ready to go to Epic, I'm ready to go to the second EHR, but I'm ready to add other value. So I'll kind of try to go the demo in that way. But then again, we can kind of see some of the questions. I will say before I kind of kick it off, everything that I'm doing today, it is actually live. Everything that we'll be doing today, you can actually go and set it up. It's absolutely free, to set it up and try it out. So please do that and give us the feedback. This is something that has really come out of the feedback of all the clients we have worked with. So we would love to continue getting that feedback. So if basically you can go to app.meldrx.com, and what you'll do is basically you'll click on this register button. It's a very simple process to just go and enter your email and you can get started with it. I'm not going to spend time on that. I just created an account in there. I'm just going to log in there directly so that we can look at the good stuff. So basically, I'll just go in there, and what will happen is after you've logged in, you'll come to this screen where there are two main points that we'll be talking about: the apps and the workspace. Typically we will always be starting with an app, but I'm going to start with the workspace so that I can show you some of the like the under the hood scene. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to say I want to create a workspace. So what is a workspace? It's basically like a database which is FHIR ready. There's a lot more in it, but we are just going to say that we're going to start very simple. So I'm just going to say I want to create a standalone workspace. I'll come back to what LinkedIn is. I click on next one, and I'm just going to say in here is let's just pick you one. Okay, so we'll just say create workspace, right? So what just happened there in about 10 seconds is I have basically created a workspace which is a FHIR ready server, ready to go. So what is typically the thing that you do first is, right, so you can go and hit it in there. So this is now a live workspace that has been created that you can start playing with it. So obviously you need an app to play with it to start kind of exploring it. So what we have done is build like a mini app tester that you can use with it. So if I just go to smart.meldrx.com, and if I can just log in with the account that I am just logged in there, this will basically give me a simple way to build a test app so that I can start working with my own app, right? So what you're seeing in here is that I'm seeing a list of, all the workspaces that I have. So I'm going to work with this MedBlocks workspace. But I also need to create an app, right? Because I need to kind of go and create an app that I want to try with. So what I'm going to go do is I'm going to go back to my, there, and I'm going to go to apps, and I'm going to register a new app, right? So we'll just call this, and again, this is MedBlocks. I'm going to call it like I'm building a provider app. I'm building a public app. So, just to keep things simple. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up, some of the common, and we'll talk about some of these, the scopes as we go along. But basically, I'm picking up some of the common ones that we'll be using in the system. So let me see, I got most of them, right? Okay, we can always come back and add it. And then again, if you are familiar with OAuth flow, this is typical what you're doing in any OAuth app. So I need to add a redirect URL. And what I'll do is, because I'll be using my test app, so I can actually just copy this URL from here, put that URL in there, and I'll say, okay, the next. We'll come back to what a linked app is. I'm just going to click next. It asks me if I want to create a workspace. We already created one, so I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to just basically go create. So what basically just happened was I created a workspace, which is basically a sandbox, and I have created an app, right? So this is basically the app, and we have ways in here where you can actually go create like an app template and other thing. But I'm just going to use this app for simplicity. So I'm going to refresh this so that we can actually see that app in here. And here is the app, right? So what I am basically doing in here is we just created a sandbox. We created a workspace, which is a FHIR server. We created an app. And I'm just going to go and say that I want to connect to this app. So this will typically be your app. This is just a login screen. And I'm just going to say, yeah, you know what? I want to go ahead and connect to this app to basically open it. So out of the box, it's basically connecting to it like a smart on FHIR app. It's asking me for the scopes. It takes me in there. And what it brings me is to we have a mini kind of an EHR plus like an app. It's a very minimalistic app to kind of just show some things. And I can just go and, search for patients. Obviously, there are no patients in there because we just created it, right? So there's nothing in there. So what we basically allow you to do is there is like an API explorer so that at this point, if you want to use Postman, you want to try it out whatever way, you have your access token, you have everything in here to start playing with that workspace. What I'll do is we have built some sample data. This is something we often use for, when EHRs are testing with Inferno. We have a we have a sample data set that we use. So I can simply go in there and just upload, that data. And if I come back in here and I refresh it, there is a patient that has basically been uploaded there. Okay, I can also click on that patient, and this is like, working like a mini EHR. I can see some of the data in there, whatever was available in that particular, bundle. But I can also go back to this API Explorer, and I can actually run all the queries, from here. So if I just want to say, okay, show me all the patients that are in my FHIR server, I can actually see them. So this is just like a mini Postman. I can show like, okay, show me all the allergies. So it's basically running these basic FHIR queries, there. And again, you can take the token from here. You can, kind of work it there. But that is kind of, in a matter of like 3 minutes, 5 minutes, you have a fully working sandbox that you can kind of, play with it. And again, there are other things that you can add to it. So like if I go to and look at another app that our users use, right? This is what our EHRs basically get out of the, the box. So I can actually now use that in a different app where I'm seeing that patient, but in this case, they work with CCDAs, right? So I can actually go in there. I'm going to just upload a CCDA. And if I upload that CCDA, this CCDA is going to get converted into all FHIR resources. So give it a second, refresh it. So now I can see that, this is basically all that CCDA has been converted into individual resources. So I have a different way to look at all the patient data in here where I can, again, collapse them, adjust them. There's a lot of things you can do in there. So the bottom line here is like that. We built a standalone workspace, which is a FHIR sandbox. You can upload the data using CCDAs. You can upload the data using bundles. You have a fully working, scenario using with it, right? So this is good. This is step one. I got it. It looks good, but I want to actually build my app to work with Epic, right? So how do I kind of go from here to the next step, right? So let's kind of walk through it now, knowing that we have a standalone, workspace. We have a standalone and we have tested with it. So what we do here is, so this is where we kind of make it simple to say, how do I make my first query to Epic and, kind of get a similar experience if I've tested it with a random FHIR server, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say here, create a new workspace. Okay. And this time I'm going to select a linked workspace. Okay. What does linked workspace basically mean? It's a workspace that is connected to an EHR, or for that matter, for any FHIR API provider. Okay. So I'm going to click on next in here, and I'm going to just give it a name here to say MedBlocks Epic. Okay. So we have like the most common EHRs in there, but then you can go and select from all the, the different EHRs that provide FHIR API providers. So I'm just going to select Epic. And again, what you would typically do is you can come in there and enter any FHIR API URL, but Epic actually provides a public sandbox. So we have kind of loaded it just to make it, fast there. So I'm just going to go this and say that, okay, I create a, I want to create a workspace. So again, as simple as that, it has now created an Epic workspace for me. Okay. So which we're going to try to connect through our app. Now, in order to make my app connect with this Epic workspace, obviously I need an Epic credential, right? So the goal here is that I want to make sure that that one app that I created, I can use that same app to connect to every EHR. So the way to do that is I'm just going to go into that same app again, and I'm going to go down in there and I'm going to say I want to add a linked app to it, right? So this app will allow me to connect to multiple EHRs. I'm going to select Epic from there, right? And what you can do at this point is you can basically go to Epic, register an app. It's a pretty simple process, right? It's like, and come and enter in there, or we let you borrow our credentials. So we have our credentials that we don't show you, but we have preloaded just so that, you can get quickly kind of going. So I'm just going to, use our credentials, and then I'll just say we'll select the same, scope. So profile, open ID, launch, launch patient, we'll just pick some, even the ones that Epic doesn't support, because you'll see kind of how it, automatically matches. So now what I have done is I basically created a new workspace. I created an app. I updated my app to basically connect to, LinkedIn, right? So if I just go back to now the screen I had, right? So let's just go back to the screen where we were, where we do the launch in there, right? So I'm going to basically in here is like, I want to connect to Epic now. We're going to use the same app. So I'm not changing the app. I'm just saying that the same app, I want to connect to Epic. and I'm just going to, launch the patient. I want to select the patient at, basically the launch in there. I'm going to copy this URL because, I want to show you the single sign-on so that we can do a fresh session in a incognito window. So I'm just going to copy that URL and go to a new window. And what you will see is like, just like that, we have basically made our first connection to Epic, right? So again, I went through everything from scratch. This is like ready to connect to Epic, and this is actually Epic, right? So I'm going to just log into Epic, from there. So this is typically what a Epic user will see. I'm just selecting a particular patient, just go through the access process. Since I'm logging in the first time, it will basically just ask me to create an email, and you don't have to ever remind this email because it's all single sign-on. So I'll just go ahead and type an email in there. I don't know if that's your real email or that's a real email or not, but we won't have to do the validation. I'm working in dev mode, so just approve it. And what you will see is like it will come back to the exact same app, right? So this is the same app, but now it is pulling data from Epic, right? So nothing, I didn't have to change a single line of code. I didn't have to change anything. I am on that same app pulling data from Epic. But this is where I want to kind of, touch base on one thing that, you kind of brought up. What is the number one challenge that, people run into? Is like, okay, if you go to Epic, right, okay, it gives you all the list of the resources that, you can connect to. And one of the first use cases we worked was like, okay, I'm building a care management app that will detect and create tasks for me and other things. But Epic doesn't allow you to write tasks. There is no way to write tasks. You can query the task, but you can't write it. So what I can actually do in here is if I go back into my app, right, again, this is connected to Epic, right? So you see this app, I can actually click on this button to say, I want to create a new task, right? And this is just a very simple way, we are creating FHIR tasks in the back end. And if I save it here, what you will see here is basically that it is showing me a patient from Epic where all this data is being pulled from Epic, but this data is actually being pulled from MeldRx and melded together in the same screen.
Okay, wait, hold up. So here, we are not actually writing this data back to Epic.
Exactly.
Okay, but still we are able to store it by using the same FHIR API, and your app doesn't have to do anything different.
You got it. Exactly. So what we are doing is, because this particular resource is not supported by Epic, okay, it supports reading, but it doesn't support writing. We are able to pull the task from both places, but we can write the task in one place. Now, tomorrow, if Epic starts supporting it, this can basically go back to Epic and, kind of collect it in there.
Okay, got it. So the developers are basically, running ahead of the EHR's compatibility with a particular API. And once the EHR supports it and regulation comes in, and then this just like shows up in the EHR.
Bingo. Exactly. And again, and this is again, as I said, we want to make sure there is no kind of magic or anything going on. Anytime you want to kind of go and understand what it is, you can switch on to the API Explorer. You can actually go and run the query yourself, right? So if I just want to say I want to run the task query myself, and we make it really simple, and it knows which patient I am in, so I can actually quickly build my query in here and run this query. And when I run this query, you'll see what we do is we actually return two bundles back from there. We are returning a bundle back from Epic. We are returning a bundle back from MeldRx. We are combining that data, into a single source. And that's why you can actually see there is full provenance built into it. So you can see that, this data is coming from MeldRx. It is allowing you to edit it. If I do a similar thing in here, right, if I just go to allergies and let's just say I add an allergy here too, and for this sake, I'll just say that I'm only writing allergies to, MeldRx and not writing it to Epic. It is actually giving me full provenance in there where every resource is coming from. So your app can even decide, I only want to look at Epic data. I only want to look at this. I don't want to do it till there. And you have all that available in here. So here there is a provenance document in there, which is basically providing you full details of kind of where the data is coming from and how it is being, brought together.
Amazing. And again, before somebody comments on this video with, most of these people are, they know how to interact with Epic. So they'll probably be expecting a bundle of tasks and not a bundle of bundles. So
Yeah.
if their app only wants to, maintain full compatibility with FHIR, and they don't want two separate bundles, and they just want to expect what a FHIR API returns, Is there
I
anything
am
that?
so glad you asked it. So it is literally a setting. We can go into the workspace at the back end and manage it, that flatten it. So we call it like flattening the bundles. You can have it. You can then not have any provenance or anything. You can basically get it back as one, or you can basically get it as two bundles. When we launched this feature and we were talking to some of the initial clients, they wanted provenance to be a key component of it. So we basically separated it out, but it is basically up to the developer complete. And I'll show you some of the data rules, how it work in the backend. You can decide to get it as one entry, you can decide to get it as two, and you can meld it whatever way you want.
Got it.
That control is simply a button control in there, and we'll see that.
Got it.
So awesome. Okay, so what I went through here is like, basically we started with a standalone, we connected with the Epic, right? So let's take it just like one step forward, right? Okay, so this is Epic, but how do I go from one EHR to multi EHR, right? So I kind of want to go a little bit there too. So I'm going to go back to my command center, what we call it, and I'm going to say I want to create another workspace, right? So I'm just going to go create another workspace, another linked workspace, and I'm just going to call it MedBlocks Cerner here, and I'm just this time I'm going to select Cerner. Okay. So we are still building a provider app. So Cerner actually provides, same thing. We are trying to make it really, really simple for you to create your first one. So just create that workspace in there. So now we have a Cerner workspace. And similarly, I can go to my app, the same app, but I'm just going to add basically, another linked app to it for Cerner, right? So just use the sample credentials. So again, this process it's only one time you're doing the first time. So I can just add this in here. And if I just say OpenID profile, launch, and let's just select some of the same. So Cerner has a little bit different how they kind of do the scopes. And again, we kind of normalize it all in the backend, but I'm just going to, select them. So basically what I've done is use the same app, and I have now connected it with Cerner too, right? So let's go back to our, smart app. I'll just start from scratch here so that we can actually, just see it. So again, I'm going to select MedBlocks Cerner this time. I'm going to select the same app, right? So I'm not changing the app. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually select the same scopes that I selected for Epic, right? So the developer doesn't need to know. Now, you might be aware of this is like, Cerner does launch patient a little differently. There's a lot of even variations between Cerner and Epic, how they do it. So you'll see kind of how it works. I'm going to copy the launch URL from here. We're going to do the same process as we did with Epic here. So go in there. This time it is going to take me to Cerner. So that's actually the Cerner, portal in there. I'm going to basically, log in, right? So just like doing the normal thing. And you will notice in here, so again, the one process in there. So we'll just say MedBlocks Cerner.
So here, can I ask you, why do you need an email in here?
So we are basically doing a single sign-on. The Cerner account, the user, I logged in as a Cerner user, right? So that user is being mapped to an account in our system. So when the first time login happens, it's basically behind the scenes is creating a mapped identity to us. So this email is just a way if they need to change tomorrow, they want to decouple that linked workspace and only use the data in there, that email gets them access directly to this. Even if Cerner is down sometime and the app wants to only use it there, it basically gives them another account where they can continue to use the Cerner ID, Cerner SSO, but they can use it without that too. So that's kind of a way to say you have a backdoor entry into Cerner, into the workspace if you need to, just in case the linked workspace is out, and it provides you that backup, right? So in here now you will actually see is that, I never got the screen to select a patient or anything because Cerner doesn't have a launch patient. They work a little, differently here. But what I can do here is, what we kind of detect that is like, okay, because they are not doing it, we actually provide an interface, for it to basically let the user select it. So here I am now querying Cerner patients. I'm actually searching across Cerner. I can select the same patient. I can select a patient from there. Again, I'm seeing all the data from Cerner, but what you will notice in here is I'm actually getting an error here. And the reason this error is here is because Epic allows you reading the task, but Cerner have an API that actually even allows you to do those tasks. So it is kind of telling me like this was completely unsuccessful because, Cerner kind of gave me that error back. Again, and this is kind of where you have complete control over what you want to do. So what I can actually do in here is, if I go back to that workspace that I had created, right? So this is the workspace. I can actually go into that workspace and I can manage my rules down to a very resource level. So what by default happens is that when we are reading the resources, we say we always read it from both sources, right? Because we want to collect them together. But we are right default by MeldRx, but you can write it to the external system. So I'm going to go all the way down in here, and I'm going to say, because I know this is a Cerner workspace, Cerner doesn't even allow me to read it from there. I only want you to read the task from here, right? Okay. So that basically is now, again, a click in here, and this is where I can configure a lot of other configurations. And I come back in here and I refresh it. The error is gone, but I still have the ability now to write the task, manage it. Tomorrow, if Cerner supports it, I can basically collect it. So again, depending on the EHR, depending on the functionality, you have full control over how you kind of roll this out.
Excellent. So this is, I think, a very good name for your product, which is like MeldRx. You're melding data from multiple sources. And even if it does not support certain things, you're making sure that it can work. And then later on, when they do actually work, providing them that ability to really work with the EHR.
Exactly. And when we came up with the name MeldRx, originally the intent was it was melding data, but we have kind of grown to it is like it's not just melding data, it is melding everything you need, right? So getting the EHR data is just the start of it. There is a lot of other things, right? I was showing you that simple app that is here, like you have that data, you have those tasks in there. I want to actually connect with the patient. So there is multiple APIs where we can actually connect with the patient. We can get the data patient back. We can have the patient share their data from payers, right? One of the use cases we are working a lot in is clinical trials, right? Where they basically build a workspace with us, and then they can have the patient share their data from Medicare or from other EHR. So we just says again, come up with the idea, right? Is like we want to remove all those barriers, whether it is getting the data from an EHR, saving your app data, getting your data from a network, like care quality or other thing. We are trying to meld all those resources with data being the primary one in one particular place.
It's perfect. I think, coming back to our discussion, right? Like we initially talked about the need for a headless EHR, and what you showed in the demo here with that standalone mode where they can just quickly get started, that looks like a future headless EHR. But
yep.
For apps to, for you to get this ecosystem of apps first, so that the pull for headless EHRs is from the, actual customers, you need apps, and you need apps to work. So it seems like you're tackling both of these problems using the same one single solution. And that's like, beautiful.
Yeah. And Sidharth, add to it, you mentioned a word like, standalone, right? So kind of everything I showed in there is basically a standalone. Everything that we showed in here also works as an EHR launch. So we have done like multiple levels of simplicity where you want your app to be launched within the EHR. The same thing, it can actually launch from there. And also like what are the other like one of the very common technologies we hear about is, which is I don't think it gets the love it should, is like Firecast, right? Where it is like, okay, I'm working in my EHR, but I don't want, there's not enough real estate on the EHR, but I want to work in this parallel, in the app in parallel, but I can kind of sync up my context. I don't have to click every time a button in there. EHR launch is good when you know kind of what you want to do. CDS hooks is like, good when you want to get the context. But what if I want to use app as in parallel? So we are basically building a lot of backend where, it doesn't matter. You tell the problem, like what is the way your app needs it. If it is a standalone, great. If it is EHR launch, it works. If it is Firecast, Epic supports Firecast today. I mean, I know many other EHR support it, but let's just find the best solution in there and get your app out there. Let's get the idea out there. Let's provide that, care, and then it can grow in there. If there are enough apps in there, I think the rest of the problems, the other EHRs will just come along.
Absolutely. And I think, there is just so much spec work that has not been properly adopted by the EHRs, exactly. Like Firecast being one of them. There is like smart web messaging. There is the even CDS hooks, to be honest. I don't think CDS hooks is properly implemented by many EHRs.
Oh God, that's like, don't get me started. That's one of the things I really feel is like it has so much potential. We actually have a CDS hooks in our demo, in our actually mini EHR that we kind of build, and we are actually building that as part of our B11 to encourage our EHR partners to use it. But I really feel is that the AI thing will really drive technologies like CDS hooks, or will create a demand for this because they will want to see that right in the EHR.
Yeah, this is like It's great. So just for the audience, what is G11 and what is G10?
Oh, you mean B11?
Oh, sorry, B11 and G10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's throw the alphabet soup in here, right? There is the G10, the B10, and the B11, right? So G10 and B10 kind of go together. They are really all about FHIR, or basically having EHRs create the FHIR standard and support it, right? All about supporting FHIR for patient engagement as well as provider apps. Everything that I showed today is actually working on the US CDI standard, which is part of the G10 requirement. B10 is kind of a layer above G10. It doesn't really require FHIR, but what B10 was written was is like the intent behind B10 was, I am a provider, I'm not happy with the EHR, I want to move to another EHR, give me a quick way to get my data. Now, the most common implementation of B10 is basically bulk FHIR, which is like I can get the data, take it to another EHR and implement it. So both of these regulations supposedly are already enforced and everyone should be doing it. But then what B11 is something that is going into effect at the end of this year, where every EHR has to basically, support it. And it is actually, like there was an original requirement A9 that was written like almost a decade ago, which was all about how to require CDS, clinical decision support in EHRs. And this is basically like a modern version or a completely rewritten version of B11. What it basically requires is it lays out the specification how EHR should implement evidence-based care and predictive, AI in their system. So that regulation basically is a guideline for that, saying that every EHR will need to allow providers to allow evidence-based solutions, which is like, okay, hey, with the calculators and other things that we know about, but then, how do you basically control the AI, all this buzz around and bring it into the EHR? So it sets up the guidelines for it. And what it really tries to do is it is the intent there is again to build the trust around that if I am a provider, I'm using some AI app in my system, can I make a decision based on it? Because one of the feedback we are hearing a lot that, we have been talking to some of even the regulatory bodies and getting that is like hospitals are very concerned right now of implementing or not implementing AI. They implement AI, they are like worried about is like if we get like liability or if we make a decision based on AI. But if you don't implement an AI and there was an algorithm that was available in there, the patient will say, why were you not using it? So they can't just say they're not going to implement it. So there's a big kind of a market out or a big requirement out there is to say, how do you properly vet out and, so that there's no bias in those AI algorithms and what are the right way to do it. So B11 basically puts a box around it to say, you as an EHR, I am providing you these AIs, these algorithms, these, CDS systems. I will provide you the sources, I will provide you how it is updated, I will provide you how it is tested, I will provide you all that framework in there, but then you can go and make that call. And then, again, we are doing a responsible AI and kind of, progressing in there. So in my humble opinion, I think it is a very, very, like after G10, I think this is one of the biggest regulation change that is coming in there. And I think we'll see a lot of it kind of shaping in the next few months. We are actually working with a couple of organizations that are very app focused and kind of bringing it together. So very excited about the potential here and how this will drive like a lot of the healthcare app development.
Yeah, I really like one point that you made there, which is not using AI could be a safety issue when you have it available. It's the same with self-driving cars. People claim that once it gets beyond a point, humans driving is unsafe.
Exactly. It came from one of the organizations that we work with, and they came to us and they were like, we are implementing it, and our attorneys advised us that there is a regulation about patients might be able to tell you is like, you didn't use AI. I mean, you had that resource, why didn't you use it? Okay. So so you can't just say no AI in our organization. That's a tough decision you have to make.
I think it extends to apps as well. I think AI is one app, and not
100%.
the practitioner not using that app that's specific for that workflow is a safety concern, right?
No, you absolutely. So we are thinking AI is just a type of app, right? So it is basically a headless app that is providing that algorithms and other thing. But for all like technical purposes and the way we are defining it and integrating it, we basically, like, you can go build an app in here, which is basically an app, but it doesn't kind of integrate directly. But all AI algorithms are ultimately apps being deployed in there, exposed through CDS hooks or exposed through other ways, but it's basically all apps. So AI is just a type of apps. That's kind of, the way it is.
It's excellent. So, Pawan, do you have anything else that you want to share, or anything you want the audience to like go check out immediately right now?
I'll just say again is like, this is all feedback. No one company or no one organization can solve all the problems. I think we have a great opportunity ahead of us. We are looking for more and more collaborators, both on the app side as well as the organization. We are always looking for ideas. I think I said before is everything I showed today is available for free. Our goal here is to really open the market and make it easier for anyone to come and build an app. So reach out to us. Our team is pretty hands-on. We want to work the idea. If there's something we can't do today, we will try to build it. So really the only call is like I think we have a good opportunity here with everything happening to change healthcare. We'll love to kind of partner with like-minded people. I mean, we have been partnering with you, talking about so many app opportunities. So same offer to everyone that wants to work. Please reach out to us.
Perfect. So I will put the description. I will have a link to MeldRx that you can go check out. I'll put it in the description below. I will also put Pawan's profile down there, so you can always go check out and say hi to him whenever you want. And this
Would
has
love
been
to hear
great.
from everyone.
I really think you are taking this on head first, right? Like, not a lot of people do this, especially in the US market, right? Like, it's amazing to see you really fight this battle. So really impressive.
Really appreciate it, Sidharth.
So
We'll win it
thank
together.
you.
Awesome. Thank you so
Yeah,
much, Sidharth.
thanks a lot. And yeah, see you.